Your palms are sweating. Your heart is pounding. You're standing in front of 30 people and all you have to do is talk. That's it. Just talk. But your body doesn't believe you. Your body thinks you're about to die. Why would something so harmless feel so dangerous? The answer isn't in your job interview. It isn't in your school presentation. It isn't even in this century. The real answer is far stranger. It's buried in a time before words existed, before cities existed, before your species had a name for itself. You inherited this fear. You didn't choose it. And once you understand where it came from, you'll never look at a podium the same way again. 200,000 years ago, your ancestors lived in small bands, 20 people, maybe 50. That was the entire world. There was no anonymity, no strangers passing by unnoticed. Every face you saw belonged to someone who could feed you, protect you, or abandon you. Being watched by the group wasn't neutral. It was a verdict. If the group approved of you, you ate. You were protected. You survived the night. If the group turned against you, you were cast out. And alone, in a world full of predators, being cast out meant almost certain death. Your brain never forgot this. Somewhere in the oldest part of your skull, standing in front of a group still registers as a life-or-death evaluation, not a presentation, a trial. This is why psychologists call public speaking one of the most commonly reported fears in the world, often ranking above the fear of death itself. Not because talking is dangerous, because being judged by a group once was. Think about what actually happens to your body before you speak. Your heart rate spikes. Your breathing shortens. Your hands shake. This isn't nervousness in the way you think of it. This is your amygdala, the ancient alarm system in your brain, sounding a threat response that predates spoken language. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux spent decades studying this exact circuit. He found that the amygdala can trigger a full threat response before the rational part of your brain even processes what's happening. Your body reacts first. Your mind explains it later. So when you feel that flood of dread before walking on stage, you're not overreacting. You're running code that's over 100,000 years old. But here's the part that should unsettle you a little more. This fear isn't just about being watched. It's about being watched by many people at once. Anthropologist Dunbar spent years researching the size of human social groups throughout evolutionary history. His research suggests that our ancestors' social circles rarely exceeded about 150 people. This became known as Dunbar's number. It represents the rough limit of relationships your brain evolved to track and manage. A crowd, a packed room, a camera pointed at you, broadcasting to thousands. These situations overwhelm a system that was built for tribes, not stadiums. Your brain doesn't know the difference between 150 acquaintances and 10,000 strangers on the internet. It just knows too many eyes, too much risk. Isn't it strange that a fear built for survival on the savannah now activates during a slide deck about quarterly earnings? Now imagine you're back in that ancient world. You say something wrong. You misjudge the group's mood. You offend the wrong person. In a band of 20, that mistake doesn't disappear. Everyone remembers. Reputation was currency, and there was no way to earn it back quickly. This is where social psychologist Mark Leary's research becomes essential. Leary developed what's known as sociometer theory, the idea that self-esteem functions as an internal gauge, constantly monitoring how included or excluded you are by others. When that gauge drops, when you sense disapproval, your brain interprets it as a genuine threat to your survival chances. Public speaking puts that gauge on full display. Every face in the crowd becomes a potential source of judgment. Every silence after a sentence feels like evidence you're failing. You're not afraid of the microphone. You're afraid of exile. Here's something most people never stop to consider. The fear doesn't just come from being watched. It comes from being watched without the ability to read every face at once. In a small band of 20 people, you could scan the entire group in seconds. You could see who was smiling, who was frowning, who was whispering to their neighbor. Your brain had full information. It could calculate risk accurately, moment by moment. Now put yourself in a lecture hall of 200 people, or in front of a camera lens where the audience is invisible entirely. Your brain can't scan that many faces. It can't gather the information it evolved to rely on, so it defaults to the worst-case assumption: danger until proven otherwise. Psychologist Paul Gilbert, who has spent much of his career studying the biology of shame and social threat, describes this as a mismatch between an ancient threat detection system and a modern social environment it was never designed to handle. Your brain isn't wrong to feel alarmed. It's simply working with outdated assumptions about how many people it's supposed to track and how quickly it can assess them. This is also why written communication rarely triggers the same panic. A tweet, an email, a text message, none of these activate the same alarm, even when the content is identical to something you'd say out loud. Why would the medium matter so much if the words themselves haven't changed? Because writing doesn't expose your voice shaking. It doesn't expose your face flushing red. It doesn't broadcast in real time whether the group is accepting or rejecting you. Speech is immediate. Speech is exposed. And exposure to your ancient brain is vulnerability. Consider how differently this fear behaves depending on the audience. Speaking to 5 close friends rarely triggers the same panic as speaking to 50 strangers. Why would that be if the words coming out of your mouth are exactly the same? Because your ancient threat detector isn't measuring content, it's measuring risk of rejection. Familiar faces signal safety. Unfamiliar faces signal unknown judgment, and unknown judgment is the most dangerous kind. This explains something else too. Have you ever noticed that your fear spikes hardest right before you start speaking and then eases once you're a few sentences in? That's not random. Once your brain confirms it isn't being immediately attacked, the threat response begins to downgrade. You survive the first 10 seconds. The tribe hasn't turned on you yet. Your body is still running a survival check, sentence by sentence, waiting for permission to relax. Think about how strange this pattern becomes once you notice it elsewhere. You feel a similar tightness before hitting send on a risky message. A similar dread before walking into a room where you suspect people have been talking about you. A similar flush of heat when you're called out in a meeting and every eye turns toward you at once. All of these moments share the same ancient thread: group attention, public evaluation, the possibility of exclusion. Your brain treats a boardroom the same way it once treated a circle of firelight, scanning for signs that you're about to be judged unworthy of your place in it. There's a reason this fear didn't fade away as human society changed. Evolution doesn't clean out old programs just because the world moved on. It builds new behavior on top of ancient wiring. Cities replaced tribes. Screens replaced firelight. But the alarm system stayed exactly the same. Consider how long it actually takes for evolutionary change to reshape instinct. Modern cities have existed for roughly 6,000 years. Modern mass media, barely a century. Against a backdrop of 200,000 years of small group living, that's not even the blink of an eye. Your genes haven't caught up. They're still optimized for a world of firelight and familiar faces, not fluorescent lights and unfamiliar crowds. This is part of why the fear feels so disproportionate to the actual stakes. You know, intellectually, that a bad presentation won't get you exiled from your tribe. Nobody is going to leave you outside the walls tonight because you stumbled over a sentence. But the part of your brain sounding the alarm doesn't run on modern logic. It runs on ancient odds, calculated for a world where social failure and physical death were often the same outcome. You're essentially running Stone Age software on a smartphone-era operating system. So what do you do with a fear this old? You can't delete it. You can't out-argue it with logic because it isn't a logical fear to begin with. It's a survival fear wearing modern clothes. But understanding where it comes from changes something important. When your hands shake before a presentation, you're not broken. You're not uniquely anxious. You're experiencing the exact same circuitry that once kept a small band of humans alive on an unforgiving plane. That shaking hand is a relic, a message passed down from every ancestor who avoided being cast out long enough to have children, who had children, who eventually became you. Every person who has ever stood in front of a room and felt their throat tighten is feeling something deeply, unmistakably human. Actors feel it. World leaders feel it. Scientists who have spent their careers studying this exact fear still feel it, right before they step up to explain their findings. You are not fighting a personal weakness. You are fighting inheritance. There's a strange comfort hidden inside that idea. If this fear were unique to you, it might mean something was wrong with you specifically. But it isn't unique. It runs through nearly every human being who has ever lived, across every culture, every language, every era of recorded history. Anthropologists studying isolated tribal communities, populations with no exposure to modern media or crowd culture, still find the same physical stress response when individuals are asked to speak in front of the group. That consistency across such vastly different societies is hard to explain any other way. This isn't a modern anxiety invented by classrooms and job interviews. It's a signature woven into the species itself. Knowing this doesn't switch the fear off. Nobody watches a video and instantly stops sweating before their next presentation. But it does change what the fear means. It stops being proof that you're uniquely fragile, and it starts being proof that you're exactly like everyone who came before you. The hunter who hesitated before speaking up at the fire. The elder who chose words carefully before addressing the group. The ancestor who understood, on some instinctive level, that words spoken to many carried far more weight than words spoken to one. That instinct kept them alive long enough to pass it down. And now it lives in you, resurfacing every time you step toward a microphone, a stage, or a room full of unfamiliar faces. And maybe that reframes the whole experience. The next time you're waiting backstage, or waiting for your name to be called, or waiting for the video call to connect, remember what your body is actually doing. It isn't malfunctioning. It's protecting you the only way it knows how, using tools built for a world that no longer exists. Your palms are still sweating. Your heart is still pounding. But now you know what that feeling actually is. It isn't the fear of failing in front of strangers. It's the oldest fear your species has ever carried, one that once meant the difference between belonging and disappearing entirely. You're not afraid of the room. You're carrying every ancestor who was afraid of being left outside it.
Welcome back to Brainwired. Don't forget to subscribe, join the Brainwired family, and hit that bell.